everyone! So my name is Gabby, and as a lot of you probably know, I attempted to thru-hike the Appalachian Trail in 2022. After about 700 miles, I made the decision to get off the trail, but no worries because I will be back next year and attempting another thru-hike in 2023. But anyways, I thought it would be fun to make a video just talking about the things that I wish I would have known before I started my 2022 Appalachian Trail thru-hike attempt. So let's go ahead and jump right into the video. The first thing I wish I would have known before starting the Appalachian Trail is to take the cold weather seriously. I started the Appalachian Trail on February 15th, 2022, and of course, because it was February, it was super cold outside. I started with a sleeping bag that had a 20-degree comfort rating, but unfortunately it was a pretty cheaply made synthetic bag and it actually wasn't warm at all. I remember my first night at Springer Mountain Shelter. I think it got down to around 37 degrees, but I pretty much shivered the whole entire night in that sleeping bag and even using a sleeping bag liner with it. When I tested that sleeping bag out at home in probably about 20-degree weather, I was perfectly fine, so I didn't really understand why I was getting cold at around 37 degrees. It turns out that when you're living outside, you're feeling anxious and you're not really eating enough food, that your body has a lot harder time producing heat than when you just step outside your house and test a sleeping bag. So that being said, I definitely recommend taking a warmer sleeping bag, and even if you're on a tight budget, it might be worth it to splurge on a sleeping bag that's going to keep you warm. Okay, so the next thing I wish I understood before starting the Appalachian Trail is that stretching is so important. When you first start the Appalachian Trail, your body is going to feel beyond fatigued. Basically, everything's going to hurt. Your feet are going to hurt, your ankles are going to hurt, your legs are going to hurt, your back's going to hurt, your arms are going to hurt. I don't know, maybe even your fingers and toes will hurt. You're actually really going to be surprised at how many things hurt. And because everything hurts, stretching is going to seem pretty uncomfortable, but trust me on this one, if you don't, the odds of ending up with an injury are pretty high. For those of you who watched my videos, you know that I got off the trail around mile 500 with a pretty bad hip injury. I was dealing with gluteal tendonitis and then also a tight IT band. And it pretty much got to the point where I was really struggling to walk. I think there are a few different reasons why that happened to me, but I honestly think the biggest reason is because I wasn't doing a good enough job stretching. If I would have just listened to my body and stretched out my tendons and my muscles and not pushed myself so hard, then that injury definitely probably could have been avoided. People on the trail are always so worried about taking a fall and maybe like breaking an ankle or breaking another bone. But in reality, of course that is a problem, but I think I saw more people get off trail with overuse injuries than anything else. So yeah, make sure you're stretching every day. Really, you should be stretching in the morning, in the evening, and probably anytime you stop. Okay, so this one is a big one, and it is that you are going to have some boring days on trail. Before I started the Appalachian Trail, I was just so excited to get out there and start hiking, and it seemed to me like I would probably never get bored on the trail. I mean, the forest is constantly changing, you're always coming upon new water sources, there's animals, there's always really cool things to see, but the reality of the hike is that you are going to have some boring days. I remember several days on trail where I would hike between 15 and 20 miles, and all there really would be to see is a couple water sources, and if you're lucky, maybe some power lines. When you're doing that day in and day out, it can get boring, unfortunately. I know this is a huge debate on the trail, but for me, having headphones really did help me on those boring days. Whether I was listening to music, podcast, or an audiobook, it gave me something else to focus on and just really allowed me to enjoy my time. Hiking with other people is also a really good way to combat feeling bored. I didn't hike with other people too often, but I definitely want to do it more next year. The fourth thing I wish I would have known before starting the Appalachian Trail is that the wind can be terrifying. Before I started the Appalachian Trail in 2022, I made a video talking about my biggest fears for the Appalachian Trail. I will link to that video down below if any of y'all want to watch it. But on that video, I think I included things such as ticks, norovirus, maybe bears, I'm not sure. And while those are really big concerns on the Appalachian Trail, what actually ended up being my biggest fear was probably the wind. When I first started the trail, there were so many windy nights and days. In my opinion, it's absolutely terrifying to be in your tent at night when the wind is just absolutely howling and you know there are trees around you. And even though you do check for widowmakers before you set up your camp, you never know when one of those trees are going to fall. Quick side note for those of you who don't know, Widowmakers are essentially dead trees that look like they could fall at any time, and they're called widowmakers because unfortunately they have the potential to kill or seriously hurt you. I also used a semi-freestanding tent on the Appalachian Trail in 2022, and I really did like having the tent poles. It really gives the tent a lot more space. But there were several nights when I really did worry about my tent poles collapsing in because of the wind. So yeah, there's not much you can do about the wind besides be careful when choosing your campsites. Like I said, stay away from the widowmakers and try to camp kind of down in valleys instead of on top of big mountains. If you know that's going to be like a really windy night, it could be a good idea to sleep in a shelter or even consider getting off trail. Number 5 is that weight matters, but it's not important as you might think. So before getting on the Appalachian Trail last year, I pretty much went through every single piece of gear that I had and weighed it. I made a lighter pack, which I'm sure a lot of you are also doing. But it's kind of crazy because once I was actually on the Appalachian Trail, the weight didn't really matter to me as much as it did before I started hiking. Once I was on trail, if I thought of something that would just make me more comfortable or would just make my life better, I just went and got it, and I pretty much carried it regardless of how much it weighed. One great example of that is the time when I was in Gatlinburg and I went to the NOC store and picked up a fleece liner. Even after switching out my sleeping bag, I was still getting pretty cold at night, and I knew that there was a big snowstorm coming, so I decided that getting a fleece liner would help me sleep a lot better. Honestly, the fleece liner, it was like almost $100, maybe more, and I think it was anywhere from like half a pound to a pound heavier than the current sleeping bag liner that I was using at the time. But it improved my sleep so much and it kept me so warm. I was so comfortable in that thing that I pretty much kept carrying it even when it warmed up. A couple other things that people might tell you that you don't need to carry on the Appalachian Trail to save weight are like sunscreen and deodorant. So before I started the trail, everyone was like, oh, you don't need sunscreen, it's the green tunnel, you'll be fine. I literally think I got sunburnt on my first or second day maybe, and I pretty much carried sunscreen from that point on the rest of the trail. As far as deodorant goes, it's not really something that you need at all to hike. It doesn't provide, like the safety benefit like sunscreen does. But you're going to find that there are things on your hike that just make you feel more comfortable, and for me that was one of those things, so I chose to carry it. So basically what I'm trying to say here is yes, the weight that you carry really does matter, and it's really important to keep your big items a low weight, but you'll probably find that once you're on trail, a couple ounces isn't going to make a huge difference. I remember one time I found 4 used hand warmers at the bottom of my pack that I had just been carrying around. I mean, those probably weighed 5 or 6 ounces and I didn't realize it and I didn't care. So this last one might seem a little bit controversial and some of you may not agree with it, but in my opinion, there is no shame in quitting your thru hike. So if you're just miserable or you're really not having fun, or maybe you're injured, or maybe you just have really bad anxiety and you're missing home, it is definitely okay to make the decision to end your hike, and it's also okay to go home and take a break if you need to for a little bit. So a lot of you probably know this, but I had a lot of things happen during my hike. So first of all, I broke my tooth. I had to go to around 3 or 4 dentist appointments, and I think overall it took me about a month to get it fixed. Luckily for me, I live really close to the southern terminus of the Appalachian Trail, and that made it a lot easier to get to my dentist appointments and kind of keep hiking between appointments. But I imagine if I would have been further north, that would have been really difficult to deal with. After I got back on trail from dealing with that, I ended up with a hip injury, which I've already talked about, so I'm not going to talk about again. But that resulted in me getting off trail for about a month and going to physical therapy. Because I was off trail for so long dealing with that, and even once I finished physical therapy, my hip wasn't really 100% better. I had a hard time deciding on whether or not I should get back on the trail. Ultimately, I decided to do it, and I think it's something that I needed to do. But when I got back, the trail pretty much wasn't the same as when I left. So at that point, it was extremely hot outside. Virginia was in a drought, which is where I was hiking at the time, so there was pretty much no water. And at that point, most of the bubble had already, cleared out and moved on north. So I did meet some really awesome people that I was hiking around, but because they, weren't just off trail for a month going to physical therapy, it was not a problem for them to do 15 to 20 miles a day, whereas I really needed to be doing 8 to 10 miles a day. So with all those factors, I was feeling, pretty lonely. It was really hard for me to carry all that water weight, and I was just having a really hard time. I was struggling. I wasn't really having that much fun, and I knew that continuing forward, the situation probably wasn't going to improve. So at that point, I made the decision that was best for me to leave the trail and attempt it again another year. In my opinion, if you set out to hike, the entire Appalachian Trail and you go home on day 3 or 4 just because you're having a bad day, that's probably not the best reason to quit the trail. If you get on the trail and you do your absolute best and, maybe it's not what you thought, or maybe you're not having fun, or maybe you get an injury, then in my opinion, it's completely okay to make the decision to go home. Yes, I know that everyone out there does have the goal to make it to Katahdin, and it's really important to push yourself to reach those goals, and a lot of times that includes being uncomfortable. But you also know yourself, and you know when you have to make the best decision for yourself, so listen to your gut. One of the best things about hiking the 700 miles of the Appalachian Trail that I did hike is that I really did learn to trust myself. Alright guys, well that is going to be it for this video. I did want to film a big 3 video this week and share that with you, but the weather has just absolutely not cooperated at all. So hopefully the weather will be better next week and I can get outside and show you guys what I'm going to be using on my 2023 Appalachian Trail thru hike. I hope that you all found this video helpful, and I will see you next time. Bye!